Hi guys, welcome back to Perth BBQ School's YouTube channel. Today we're going to cover how to smoke beef cheeks. Beef cheeks are an amazing cut to smoke. They've been, traditionally braised in the past. However, there's no reason we can't adapt that to the smoker. The reason beef cheeks are so amazing comes down to one main thing, which is collagen. Collagen is what breaks down over the course of a low and slow cook, converts to gelatin, and gives beef cheeks that sort of super sticky signature texture. And so we're going to take you through today how to achieve that in your smoker. Alright, so let's talk about the trim. Depending on where you get your beef cheeks from, your trimming's going to vary a little bit, but I'll take you through what we're doing with ours. So from where we get them from, our butcher has already taken off a lot of stuff off the beef cheeks, so there's not a lot of trimming that we need to do. I am going to remove a small amount of that silver skin on top. In terms of tenderness, because we're going to finish these in a braise, we're going to, with that braising liquid, really break down any remaining silver skin pretty easily. But by removing that earlier, it's going to help us form a bark on top of that meat itself without it sort of then just dissolving away we're on the silver skin. So we're going to use a sharp knife and take a small amount of that silver skin off. I want to be careful not to do too much trimming here because they're a pretty small little parcel of meat to begin with, and so if you get too carried away with the trimming, you really are taking away too much of that protein already. Alright, so we're ready to season our beef cheeks. Now, you can season them in a variety of different things, just salt and pepper, your favourite barbecue rub, there's so many different options there. I guess a couple of things to point out. So, the main thing is if you are going to braise these beef cheeks to finish them off, you've just got to have a think about what braising recipe, what braising liquid you're going to use at the end, just so you can make sure that your rub isn't going to conflict with those flavours. If you're going into a curry or a stew or whatever you're doing, you've just got to make sure you don't have contrary flavours early on. So if you want to keep it simple, you can certainly just go salt and pepper. I'm using a rub today, the Elk Creek beef shake rub, just because I quite like the umami kind of hit you get in there from the soy powder, the Worcestershire powder. Also, the rubs I generally use for beef cheeks have a small amount of sugar in them. Now, sugar can be pretty divisive when it comes to barbecue. However, it's quite useful in this context because we're going to smoke these beef cheeks for around 2 to 3 hours before putting them in a braise, and because that's only a small amount of time exposed to that smoke and just sort of drier style heat, that sugar in there is going to caramelize quite quickly and help us hopefully form a bark quite early on, whereas traditionally it would take a lot longer using just salt and pepper, and certainly in those instances you wouldn't want to use sugar. So sugar-based rub I think is quite useful for this context. I'm going to use the beef shake, but there's a heap of different ones out there that you can use. Okay, so we're ready to smoke our beef cheeks. We're going to set our smoker for around the 250-275 Fahrenheit range. I'm going to use the bullet smoker today, the Pro Q. You could adapt this to your Weber kettle, offset smoker, Kamado, whatever smoker you've got. Anywhere around that, probably 250 to 300 Fahrenheit range or 130 to 150 Celsius, give or take, is going to be fine. Find where your smoker is comfortable sort of sitting around in that range and just roll with that. Don't get too stressed out about the temperature because we are finishing this in a braise. That's going to, take away any misgivings of the early part of the smoke if you do run a little bit too hot or don't quite get it right in that early stage. In terms of a cook plan today, all up, I would recommend allowing around 6 hours for your beef cheeks. Beef cheeks, you can definitely get them done in less time than that. They are a fairly small cut of meat, but especially if it's your first time cooking beef cheeks, and to be honest, even if it's my 20th time cooking beef cheeks, I generally allow around that 6 hours because despite being a very small cut of meat, every once in a while, because it is quite a tough cut when you think about how much cows chew, every once in a while there is just this bastard of a beef cheek that refuses to yield and break down and just takes longer than you would expect given the size and temperatures that you're running at. And that still occasionally happens to me. It's sort of like Russian roulette with beef cheeks. There can just be this stubborn little bastard that refuses to break down. So give yourself a solid 6 hours. I think you can always have a bit of time for rest in the grand schemes of low and slow, 6 hours still isn't a very long cook. So I think give yourself that time just to make life easier for you. The thing to watch out for too, so we're going to aim for an internal temperature today of probably even upwards towards the 210 Fahrenheit mark. I actually do rely on internal temperature quite a bit for beef cheeks, as well as that sort of probe feel that everyone talks about, you know, probing like butter. But the thing about beef cheeks is they can sometimes kind of trick you a little bit, because that meat on the outside is going to be quite tender, you know, around that sort of 204, 205 Fahrenheit mark. But within beef cheeks, right through the center, is just this giant seam of collagen. And that's what breaks down to give beef cheeks that signature sort of sticky, gelatinous texture that we all love about them. But if you're not careful and you don't break all of that down, you basically just got this giant rubber band sitting in the middle of this meat. And so the meat might be tender, but with that giant rubber band in the middle, it's going to be sort of terrible texture and not very enjoyable to eat. And so we really need to make sure we break that down. And that's why I do rely to an extent on that internal temperature as well, just to make sure I'm not getting tricked by the meat itself. Alright, so we're about 2.5 hours in. Our beef cheeks are looking pretty good. Well, actually, I'll be honest, they're not looking that great. And so the beef cheeks, you know, is one of the best lessons of something that we often encounter with low and slow barbecue. One of the most common mistakes, which is you know, freaking out and undercooking your low and slow cuts. And so at this point, people will often look at these beef cheeks and, you know, at the moment they look pretty dry, they look pretty shriveled up, don't look particularly appetizing, and they go, well, gee, it already looks so overcooked, I better take them off now to reduce the risk of overcooking them further. Now, this would be 100% the worst mistake you can make in your beef cheek cook. And so what I'm actually going to do today, I don't recommend trying this at home because it serves no purpose, is I'm going to cut one in half at this point, just to show you how it looks right now, because then when we look at slicing them at the end, it's going to be like day and night. And so you can see as we slice this open, you know, the meat still looks pretty tough, looks a little bit dry. That big seam of collagen in the middle, you know, that's problematic. You can see that big seam of collagen through there, that has not broken down at all. And so that collagen, you know, it's what gives beef cheeks that signature texture, but if you don't break it down, it's like having a giant rubber band in the middle of that meat. And so you really do have to focus on breaking that down. And so we're going to pop these into our braise now. So today I'm just using basically just some beef stock. I've got a different dish in mind with these later, so I'm just going to get a bit of beef stock in there, a couple of aromatics, and then I'm going to turn that into sort of a stew or something later. But in terms of braising liquids, if you don't have a recipe you want to follow, you know, beef stock just to ramp up that beef flavour. You could use a stout, like a dark beer. You could use a sweeter liquid. You know, sweet and beef, for the most part, for me, generally, I don't think they belong together. Beef cheeks is one of those big exceptions, though, because the sweet really works with that super rich, sticky, gelatinous goodness. And so I've even used things like Coca-Cola, you know, a sweeter style soft drink. But yeah, there's a ton of different options in terms of braising liquids. If you've done beef cheeks before, you know, drop your favourite braising recipe in the comments below. I'd love to hear some different ideas. So we're going to pop these in now. There's two options now when we put these beef cheeks back in the smoker. So we could leave them open, which is a technique called boating, where we've got them sitting in liquid with the surfaces sort of still open to the smoker to help keep that bark on there. What we're going to do today, though, is we're going to wrap those up in alfoil just so that we can then really trap that steam in and speed up the process. So if you're not in a rush, you can certainly go down the boating path. From there, I'd estimate it would take another further 3 hours or so to get done. But with the foil on there, you know, hopefully we're going to knock that down to maybe 1 to 2 hours. One big thing with the braising liquid is think about the temperature of your braising liquid. If you take a cold beer out of the fridge and put it in a tray and put those beef cheeks in there, you're absolutely taking a big step backwards before you start taking a step forwards in terms of time. So if you really are in a rush and you want to kind of do a sort of fast transfer over, you can heat up that braising liquid first in a saucepan before popping it into that tray with the beef cheeks, and that's really going to be your best sort of running start into finishing them off. So let's get these back in here. We're going to wrap that tray up in alfoil just to really trap everything in there and really break them down. Alright, so our beef cheeks have been in that braising liquid with the foil on top of there for around an hour and a half, and now they're starting to look beautiful. You know, they've contracted up a little bit. From a tenderness point of view, they feel amazing with that probe. and they're sitting around the 208 to 210 Fahrenheit marks, around 98, 99 Celsius on average. What we're going to do now is take them out of the barbecue, and then we're going to keep that foil wrapped on top, and we'll let them rest for around 1 to 2 hours, because if you shred and slice the beef cheeks now, there's just going to be all this steam just pouring straight out of that beef cheek. It's going to oxidize the meat, it's going to dry out, all of your fat and collagen is going to just sort of pour out onto your bench. This might be the point where someone squeezes the beef cheeks because it looks cool for Instagram. Please don't do this. It makes me mad. You wouldn't squeeze an orange and show everyone how juicy it is and then try and eat the orange unless you're a psychopath. So don't do this, please. So we're going to rest the beef cheeks for around 1 to 2 hours. What we're looking for is that internal temperature to drop below sort of around 165 Fahrenheit, so around that sort of 70, 75 degree Celsius mark. We want to serve them above 60 degrees Celsius or 140 Fahrenheit. That's the food safe zone. So anywhere in that sort of space is going to be ideal, and mean that we can kind of hang on to that moisture and have everything sort of singing in unison there. So our beef cheeks have rested now for around 2 hours. Mainly from a timing point of view, 2 hours ended up lining up with everything else. In that final half an hour, I did just pop them back into the barbecue just to keep them nice and warm. So they're sitting now around the 140 degree Fahrenheit mark or 60 degrees Celsius, so sort of right in that sort of sweet spot. And so now we're ready to serve them up. For serving up beef cheeks, if you play your cards right and really nail that sort of spot on tenderness, you end up with 2 serving options where you can either slice them or pull them. You've got a sharp enough knife, you know, being able to cut slices through that beef cheek. You get that beautiful cross section where you've got that broken down collagen that's now turned into gelatin, just sort of wobbling away in the middle there. Such a great way to serve them because it looks amazing. Pulled is probably more functional, and also because you get to really shred the cheeks and mix them around through that gelatin to kind of coat them all in that sticky goodness. And so serving them up, it's already kind of coated in all of that. If you're aiming for slices, you know, and you don't achieve that, don't stress, because the pulled is still amazing. It's just, yeah, the slices look pretty cool. Either way, it's still a delicious way to eat beef cheeks. So we're going to get these all sliced or pulled. We're going to do a little bit of both today, and probably going to make some tacos if I'm honest.